Hi, it's Adam from the Filmmakers Workshop, and in this video we're going to be talking all about the original legendary blockbuster Ghostbusters movie that came out in 1984. And today I am joined by documentary filmmakers Claire and Anthony Bueno, who've made a feature documentary called Cleaning Up the Town, which is all about the production of Ghostbusters. It's an incredible deep dive into the production of this movie, and I've got some great questions for Claire and Anthony, so stick around because I think you'll find some great insights and inspiration from what they've learned on the journey to make Cleaning Up the Town. Claire and Anthony, thanks for joining me.
Pleasure. Thanks, Adam. Thanks for having us.
What an incredible, epic documentary you've made. Thank you for sharing it with me. I really, really enjoyed it. So, what was it about Ghostbusters in particular that made you want to really get into the weeds and find out what made it such a legendary picture?
That's definitely a you question.
That's a me one. Well, Simply is my favourite film. That's where that stems from. We were already making things at the time, and it was one of those very naive kind of decisions, like, hey, do you want to make a documentary about Ghostbusters? And it's like, yeah. It's like, yeah, it's going to be a piece of cake. So we started in 2008. So yeah, we can definitely churn that out for which would have been 2009. And then like 12 years later,
yeah,
which was, an education in itself.
Yeah.
But it was just after the things we'd already done, and we already knew that we enjoyed the experience of interviewing people and hearing their stories and how some of these films came to be, and then realizing there wasn't anything that in depth about Ghostbusters. So it was just like, there was things out there, but nothing that really dives in like the docs that I've enjoyed watching. So that was basically it. It was like, well, let's make one of those, basically.
You didn't see the hurdles that were ahead. Is that?
We did not.
No,
we did not, because I think I hasten to add, you can tell we've got British accents, but we do live in Britain as well. So the logistics of traveling, to America backwards and forwards became, and the financial side of that, which obviously we'll probably talk about a bit later on. But, we're not in America, so that made it much harder to make and therefore much longer.
It's said that films are made 3 times: in the script, in the shooting, and in the editing. How did you feel that your production evolved over the considerable duration, the number of years that you were actually in production?
Well, you had written a script, but it was much more sort of modular, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But I think, am I right in saying, as we did the interviews and you started to kind of, put everything on a timeline, the story began to evolve and you wanted to tell it in a much more chronological way?
Yeah, I mean, and even that script was kind of loosely based on what that was done. Because it's like, yeah, it's a structure. We'll talk a bit about this, and then we'll talk a bit about that. And it gives you something, at least, like, how we're going to tailor the questions and the type of topics we need to be kind of touching on. So it helps inform that part of it. And as with other projects, they evolved and changed and was nothing like it was originally written, as was with this. So where it was just going to be a film that encompassed the entire franchise, like we was going to talk about the cartoon in depthly and the Ghostbusters 2 and the toys.
Right.
It just changed because the interviews became so much more comprehensive and in depth, and it's like, and you think, I really want people to hear this. Like, some of it I've heard, a lot of it I haven't, and if I start kind of paring it down to just be the stuff that basically everybody else knows, it'll be just a very kind of sanitized version, very rushed, and you won't have enough time to really kind of focus on all those other aspects. So a few things we kind of dropped off, like we're going to talk about the computer game more, and that was still about to come out, which was quite new then, and it's just like, we'll just focus on the first film.
I mean, there's hints of it throughout the documentary. There's obviously lots of animation, and there's a kind of video gamey, the whole 8-bit era is evoked. You almost touch on it. It's there. What I'm thinking is there more juice left that hasn't gone into this documentary? I just, out of curiosity.
Well, there is, and that is in what we interviewed everybody for, went into the book.
like the Ghostbusters 2 stuff, that's now going to be its own separate film.
Cool.
So,
Excellent.
there was some really kind of juicy bits and bobs. And I've seen other docs where you're kind of enjoying them, but then you realize when they're touching on certain aspects, it's like, well, they seem to have rushed through that. And it's like they're going to hit that 90-minute mark. And it's like, if you'd have actually, even if you put it for 10 or maybe even 15 minutes longer, I wouldn't have minded that. Watching these genre kind of like docs, they're already committed. They already know, they're already fans of those films or cartoons or whatever it is they're watching on. So there's an element that they're not going to mind sitting there for another 10, 15, 20 minutes or even half an hour if they're getting a much better experience. So
everybody wants an extra half a scoop, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Fill my cone. How did you work things out when you realized, wait, we've bitten off, we're going to need a bigger boat?
Yeah. Well, naively, and I don't think we'd do it any other way, is that we self-funded the documentary for the first 8 years. And our mindset was, let's put our money into making this documentary, and we'll go and have experiences that, we couldn't get anywhere else. I mean, that was kind of the thought process, wasn't it? And then as the documentary got bigger and bigger, and again, that's why it was taking so much time, because we would pull that money, and then once we pulled the money, we would then, fly out to the States, and we were in very kind of budget hotels. I mean, it was like Travel Lodge, wasn't it? And we kept it very, very low key in that respect. But as the years went on, just got to the point where, we just couldn't afford to keep going back to America. And that's where the Kickstarter thing came in, and we thought at the time it was about £40,000, which was a lot of money. But when it comes to paying for legal fees and insurance, copywriting, and price of post-production on grading and sound mixing, I mean, really, we needed another 40,000 at least.
Yeah.
And bearing in mind, we weren't getting a wage from this. All the money that we got from the Kickstarter completely was ploughed into the actual physical making of the film. We have never taken a wage at all for what we've done. There's a blessing and a curse with Kickstarter, because then with a Kickstarter, there's this whole customer service role.
Yeah, it is a job.
It is a job.
Yeah.
The other thing that we did, because we're creative and imaginative people, you're like, oh, what about this incentive? And what about that? Oh, wouldn't that incentive be great? And, like even posters become, printing them off is not the problem. Shipping them, however, is a whole other ball game.
It was what it was, really. I mean, it was a learning curve, and whether we do it again is another thing.
I feel your pain. The journey for modern filmmakers is completely new. It's like having a flashlight, and you're just trying to figure out, is this the way forward? Is this the way forward? And, this is really why having these kind of interviews, I think, is so important, because there's a lot of people out there who have got the technology in their hands, and you can see that there is some kind of distribution means through Blu-ray or through streaming, but the pathway itself, I think, people need help, and it's great to be able to share your experience, and obviously a great product at the end as well.
We were doing a film about Ghostbusters, so you would think that would rapidly go pique people's interests, but we had to fight for that.
It was a real struggle.
It was, and literally people we had people lined up with credit cards to help get us over the finishing line with like half an hour to go. We still hadn't reached our target, and we only just made it. So it was like putting all your life savings on a horse.
Oh, crikey.
It was a crazy. It was exhilarating, but also the stress attached to it. I'm not sure I'd want to do it again, but you can't never say never, isn't it, really?
At that point, you'd obviously done some interviews, and
100%. Yeah.
So you interviewed a lot of big names from the cast. How did you pull that off? Well, because for most people, the distance between normal mortals and celebrities, movie stars, is a whole another world. Tell me about how you secured some of those amazing interviews.
Well, I mean, bearing in mind we have no connections to the film industry either.
Yeah,
definitely
and
sort
especially,
of line that up.
we had a bit more, but nowadays we've got a little bit more sway because various things you do. You get to know this person, that person. It's very, it's a big, small industry, as someone said to me once. But it was IMDb Pro was the initial place, and they've got like either publicist or agent contact details within there. And then it is just that process of sending out the emails and sometimes having to chase people up, most of the time having to chase people up. And then word of mouth gets around. And then as we was able to secure a few interviews, I think there's definitely a strength to us just being a very tight crew, just me and Claire, rather than it being like 4, 5, 6 people, which can get a little bit overwhelming, especially if you are going to people's houses, which does happen on occasion. Just being quite a tight knit thing and doing it off your own back, the word spreads out. So there's people we really wanted to find, and there was no details on IMDb or anywhere. And then this person, you interview someone, oh, you interviewed such and such. No, we haven't. We're trying, I'll give him a call. Here's his number. Here's his email. And it just, and it's like, great. And then that was the other aspect, you end up getting so many interviews then. And it's like, this is perfect. And everyone gets a chance their voice to be heard. But then, initially, it's like IMDb is where it all starts.
Did you find that your outline for the documentary, as you got to do the interviews, and you met new people, did you feel that it was getting bigger? To catch a mackerel and ended up with a whale kind of thing.
It was a bit, and that was kind of when we start with going back to one of your original questions about the script evolving. I don't honestly believe that either of us thought that we were going to get Sigourney Weaver and Harold Ramis and Ivan Reitman. Dan Aykroyd we'd already got a yes from Dan Aykroyd because Anthony had got a bit of a friendship with
John Landis again from like another project, and that was kind of like that genesis was I chatted with him and said, do you think I think I might do a Ghostbusters documentary? And he's like, oh sure, I could get you Danny. And then he rattled all these names of the people he could probably get for him, might be able to that, and it's like great. And weirdly, you do think, oh, he's been going for years, so he's connected to everybody. And it's like there's some people that he doesn't know, and he is very well connected, to be fair. Worst case scenario, we'll have a chat with John. And on a few occasions, especially with Dan Aykroyd, when we were over there, because it took 4 years until we got that interview.
Wow.
So there's emails going backwards and forwards sometimes, and nothing was kind of like happening because when we were over there, he was traveling, promoting his vodka or on another project.
Yeah.
So we ended up contacting John Landis again. He's like, why didn't you come to me in the first place? It's like, well, we didn't want to. It's like, no, you should have come to me. It's like, all right. So, and that was when he contacted him, and then it all sort of like fell into place, basically. So, did buy a bottle of vodka in Soho from him also to help that happen.
Yes. Yeah. £50 it was then. I don't know if it's still that now. Probably not. But that was a lot of money to us.
Yeah.
Considering we don't drink vodka. That was our Sainsbury's run or whatever.
That's it.
Ultimately, there is a template that we are working to, so that when Anthony comes to edit, there is a synergy.
Yeah, exactly. There's a structure there, no matter whether it changes or not. But as long as there's something there to work from, that's the easier part for me.
Within this amazing array of stars who you interviewed, is there a particular favorite? Who did you learn the most from?
I mean, Ernie was our first and has become a friend through that process. And that was like, again, we were there and it was just an amazing experience. Harold was amazing.
Was phenomenal. And, he was so disarming. He had this office above a shop in Chicago in a very kind of suburban town, very unassuming, wasn't it? I mean, you would never think that there was a Hollywood actor stroke director working above this little shop. And we walked up and knocked on the door, and he opened it and he said, it's the Ghostbusters. And it just completely like, I can still pinch myself over that moment. But it completely disarmed us, and I think the biggest lesson I learned from him specifically was just about the generosity of spirit. I've been lucky enough to interview a lot of people with we had a red carpet company called Premier Scene, so we've interviewed like George Clooney and Brad Pitt and all of these people, and they have the people with true star quality have this ability to just instantly disarm you. And, you know, in that moment, it's just you and them. And Harold was so candid and down to earth. There was no airs or graces. And I think I learned a lot from him
Yeah.
about just honestly being, I don't know, it sounds a bit corny, but being a sort of decent person.
Yeah.
And not allowing, you know, fame to affect you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really came across in the interviews, definitely how comfortable and just warm these celebrities were. It felt like they were completely ready to embrace the full answers to the questions. It surprised me a lot to hear Ivan Reitman talking about how really sort of chaotic the process was of putting together the script, and how the story, the essence of what Ghostbusters was always magic, but the story that Dan had written to begin with, set in the year 2012, imagine that,
Yeah.
which just wasn't quite right. And that, to me, I thought was so brave. How much he must, as a director, trusted his instincts and his friends to really go out on a limb and go to the studio head and get the budget. Because you kind of think, I would want all my ducks in a row before I launch on this. But there's something truly magical in this production that's like a rolling ball. It's the trust and the true camaraderie between the talent and the scriptwriter, the director and the VFX people that made this happen. It's like all vectors must align for this thing to like spin and create this like Catherine wheel of excitement about Ghostbusters. I love it. It's like a true story of belief. You know?
It was actually, I mean, it was pretty maverick, wasn't it? You wonder actually whether these days it probably wouldn't happen.
That's
like
the thing.
that.
It's like, could you imagine that happening now? It's like, yeah, we chatted with the head of Disney, and we've got this thing green. It's like you isn't. It's like it's, you know, and most things by committee.
And I think picking up, you know, Adam, from what you were saying with you know the VFX guys, that camaraderie. That all starts with Richard Edlund. He's at the top of that chain. They'd come out of Industrial Light and Magic. These guys had worked on Star Wars films. You know, Richard is one of the pioneers for getting spaceships to move in space and how to get that work and look authentic. And Richard is such an incredible human being, isn't he?
Yeah, he's lovely.
And I don't think I've ever met anybody who is so highly regarded as him. I mean, and he had this he's like this band of merry men that worked for him. Well, he was when he was like Robin Hood, and you know, there isn't anything that they wouldn't do for Richard. And they were just this group of people who would bounce ideas off each other, you know, and there was no such thing as a bad idea. And, you know, even in dailies, Richard would say they would invite, you know, the person that was cleaning to come in and watch the dailies, because everybody's opinion was worth listening to. And I think that, you know, he was at the top of the chain, and that ripple effect populated down to, you know, and he said to me, he wrote to me the weekend and said, you know, there was blood in the shoes of the optical department by the time that film finished, because they were working against such colossal time frames to meet in order to, you know, to release a summer blockbuster. They did it all because they took a great pride in their work, and I think they would never want to let Richard down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Filmmaking is like extreme problem solving under pressure. So did you have any hairy moments whilst taking on these interviews?
Yes.
I don't know a time when we didn't have hairy moments.
There's one particular moment I remember is Ivan.
So when we went to interview Ivan, so we got all of our gear, which is all UK, and so the lights don't necessarily work as well.
We'll remember as well, we're talking about pre
LED,
the
LED,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
batteries.
yeah.
I mean, there was
Right,
stuff,
yeah,
but it's like now it's much more kind of efficient, and we've got a new set of lights. It's so much easier. Whereas back then there were like dado lights, which are cracking little lights, and they really look the part.
Yeah,
amazing. So we had those, and off we go. We load up, and we get over to Ivan. Montecito is where he was based at that point in time. and
it was
and
very
so
grand.
yeah,
Do you remember? It was there was like this driveway that just went for hours. It felt like hours. It wasn't, but it just went on and on and on and on and on. It was like
it's
proper
a whole,
Hollywood.
yeah, old Hollywood.
Yeah.
Big door. There's like a big roundabout driveway, and there's these doors you go through, and there's like the hallway. And I remember 2 desks with people sat either side. It was like, it's like, this hallway's as big as our house.
Yeah.
It was like, this is. But when we were setting up, realized that the power adapter that we needed for the lights was back in the hotel room because we've been charging up all the stuff and forgot to put it in. It's like, but thankfully, that his place was, because it was so grand, had these huge windows, so we didn't need any lights because it was so lit. So I mean, Joe's, because it's in the same place, just not in the same room. I wish I'd had my lights, but the problem was with those lights, because the voltages changes, you don't get like a nice, clean, almost white light. It's very warm. Right. So in some situations, that's, that was an online editor's problem to deal with in the end. The problem with the lights now, it's fantastic. It's so much more easier. Apart, as long as the charge remains and they don't run out of juice. But that was one of the many occasions. A few times that happened. You go somewhere, and then you're thinking on your feet. And Colin Campbell, the gaffer, and I'm trying to get, and I, particularly around camera and men and gaffers, I get a bit nervous because it's like they're going to suss me out straight away. It's like, I really don't know what I'm doing. I just remember something that might work.
Like you say, you need to be nimble and small to get in and get this job done without making the talent feel self-conscious and to get that rapport. On the other hand, it would be good to have an extra pair of hands for the lights and whatever. I totally feel where you're coming from. And those are the things I think which everybody runs into, trying to multitask.
There was actually a point just to pick up on as well that people might find interesting with regard to problem solving.
Yes.
Also, we didn't have a studio where we had like a green screen or anything like that. We were going to people's houses, they were coming to our hotel. And so there were things like ambient noise that we used to struggle with, where if you had a studio, you can control all of those kind of elements.
Yeah, of course.
That was out of our control. So there'd be things like, particularly in America, like air conditioning, and the fridge was always a problem as well. If they came to our hotel room, you don't that sound of the fridge. So there's those kind of things as well that we needed to be kind of very mindful of. So things like getting the wild track, that was also very important. I think wasn't it?
We could have had one other person with us, which someone just to focus on sound. Just that it's the most image stuff I can fix quite easily myself, let alone anybody else. But sound, and people can do amazing things with sound. But was it like Adobe Podcast or something like that? Which
that's right. It's amazing what they can do now. But it's only really, I think, since the whole kind of like probably the last 2 or 3 years, AI has just become incredible. I know where you're coming from too, totally on that one. It's just trying to get it right in camera. It's so nice when you come back from an interview and you've got it looks right, and it just, when it sounds good too, you just feel so much happier. I'm the kind of person that I can't even start to edit. If I think I need to I will do a little color correction and a tweak of the audio before I start editing, because I just want it to feel.
I know exactly what you mean. I used to do this. I'd still do depending on how I've shot something. Like if I've shot it in log, which is normally very weirdly beige kind of image, I can't. You try and see past it, you think, I don't want to give myself the work. Like on the first stock, I must have graded it and done all the sound. I need to kind of learn. I have to strip all of that out before we send it off to get finalized. So this time around, it's like, I don't need to do that. So most of the time I've just kind of left, like, especially on the grades, but there's a few occasions, especially when something's either been too dark or too light. It really distracts me. I've got to fix that. And the sound, I didn't do anything. And then we were having to send it somewhere. Maybe it's a film festival or something like that. I can't remember now. And our sales agent's like, we can pay somebody to do the sound. It's like, no, I can do it. I can't do it like a professional polish, but I can balance it all out. I just haven't bothered because give myself a hassle. So, and some of this stuff, it's like, it's the
price we pay, I think, for people.
Exactly.
for being these extreme problem solvers, I think, and knowing what is behind the raw element of just the video and the sound. You know that there's a nice presentable item right there. Yeah. I know what you mean.
But it's that kind of the image in your head, and you can see it, and you say, "Yeah, do you want to see this? You're going to see. I've done a bit. It's not finished yet. You know what it's going to look like. At least you hope you do." And then you present it to someone, and it's like, "Yeah, but what about that? Never mind that." I said, "What about never mind that either? It's just a raw thing. It's just like kind of and like we sent it to one of our friends, like the current like version of the Ghostbusters 2 doc, and it's like, and he was talking about this. Mainly, the main issue we had was the sound. It's like, yeah, I haven't touched that. It's like it's in I've a bit, but that I don't care about that. Does it flow?
Yeah,
story.
Is the motion graphics okay?
Story. Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's
So within the interviews, was there any significant information or anything that made you kind of pivot and think, oh, we didn't know about that? Or that's kind of opens a kind of can of worms into you having to do extra shoots or create animation. There's lots of lovely animation in this feature doc, Cleaning Up the Town. We'll go remind everyone that they should definitely be checking this out. So were there any particular interviews that spawned a kind of, we now need to figure out how we're going to cover that?
Oh God, actually there's a couple, isn't there? I suppose the Ernie Hudson story.
Yeah, I mean there was Ernie and
for me the visual effects.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that they were basically building cameras, you know, they'd have an idea of what they wanted as an effect, and they had to build the cameras and get the film stock, you know, developed with Kodak to actually create that effect. That kind of ingenuity was something I knew nothing about at that, and which was fascinating. I feel we wanted to include that, didn't we?
It was like, you know, you're there and it's like I wouldn't even know where to start to design and build a printer that's going to create that effect, and then design a film stock to send to Kodak for them to create it, for them to design lenses and all this kind of, it's like, I don't know where to start. I didn't even know that was a thing. So, and it didn't, I never thought of it being a problem sort of like in the edit. It was like, oh, right, okay, this is like, it was more like you hear these things, it's like, I really want this to be in here. And what we like found through the interviews, and certainly when it was going to be like one film that was going to cover both the Ghostbusters films as it was then, was this kind of arc within the film industry, that photochemical era. Right. Which only really, you know, we've had the digital era now far longer than we had any of that kind of like post Star Wars kind of like time, like from like 76, 77 for Star Wars into like Jurassic Park, really like early 90s when CG really kind of took over. So which just kind of like we're really capturing, and I wanted to get that kind of bookend when discussing the films, which we've been able to do, and you'll see in the second one. So there was that element to it. And I know that certainly when we're talking to Dan Aykroyd, and I knew all about Dan Aykroyd's, you know, the original draft and stuff like that. I'd read bits about it. But when we found that he didn't know where that actual script was, so we weren't going to have it. And that was like, well, that was like and again, it's like, you can't remove it. So how are we going to get around it? And that's where the animation came from. And I can't remember who came up with the idea. I remember Derek kind of roughed out the script, if you like, because he knew more about what that original script was all about. So we kind of created this kind of like, I think it was going to be like a trailer originally, and then we were able to give that to Ollie, and so that was all shot here. It was all rotoscoped. So we went to Birmingham, and Ollie Jones shot all of that because he knew how to do it, and then created the animation over the top and then sent it back, and it was just like, it's awesome. And we wanted it to look very heavy metal. That was the one thing that I wanted. I wanted it to look like heavy metal. I wanted it to look like that kind of early animation.
Because again, the guys from Boss Film, Richard Edlund, not so much Richard, but John Bruno and that had worked on heavy metal. So we wanted, again, just to pay that extra level of detail and homage to those guys. So that's why that was very important, that it had that specific style.
So I don't think at the point of the interviews it was like, how are we gonna, it was always, to me it was again, that naivety, yeah, we'll be able to get images, and Richard, I'm sure we'll have some photos. Yeah. And then it's only really when you kind of like going through the edit where it's like, okay, well, how are we going to do this? The only bits I wouldn't say regret, but it was what I had to cut out, which is in the book now anyway. But originally, I think the doc in its kind of final version was around about 3 hours. I really wanted to create something that was just going to be, 90-minute, something we could screen, something that people sit and watch quite easily, but still get a lot of info. So I was able to wheedle that down to just under 2 hours, and then it's now 2 hours and 7 minutes because it got converted from 25 frames to 24 frames, and every hour it adds like another 3.5 minutes, as it turns out, as I learned at the time. But there was certain bits that had to kind of go, and my favorite scene in the film is the when all that like ghost light, and you see the twin towers and it's stretching out of you. Look, I just absolutely love that shot. It just looks amazing, and most of the time looks realistic. It's just I love it. And that's like one of those things that kind of had to go in this trimmed down version. But on that plus side, that a lot of that stuff that I took out has ended up making its way into the second doc. It kind of helped create a whole beginning that in the original kind of edit, which had both Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2, a lot of that stuff wasn't there. So it kind of it works much better now, rearranging those bits. Just a shame that certain sequences went. At the end of the day, the final film was much tighter because of it, and which is what I wanted, and I did have a better flow, and it's a shame. And then you can see some of those scenes all on the Blu-ray. They're not with the we can't put in the animations or photos or artwork because you have to get that licensed, and it was just an expense we couldn't afford by that point. But you can kind of get a rough idea on the Blu-ray.
Brilliant. It's always so much fun when you can tear your own work apart and have a way to share so many of those other elements that still gave you inspiration and you felt were part of the story but didn't quite make it. Because I think it's fascinating to know sometimes what bits nearly went in, seeing how drafts are just, you start off with a tree and you ended up with a canoe. It's like, how did that?
Yes, exactly.
It's always great to see things take shape. In terms of these interviews taking shape, the one person that isn't in there is Bill Murray, and he's quite renowned for his ability to just do what Bill wants, to pick and choose interviews, to give people the finger, so to speak, and sometimes just to be a complete comic genius. And he has actually started to do interviews now. He's been on Joe Rogan, he's done Hot Wings, and he seems to kind of like maybe just be easing slightly into doing more interviews. If you had the option to interview Bill, what one question would you have asked Bill Murray?
You do off documentary.
Yes, you've just read my mind. I mean, I talk about it in the book, but I've interviewed him, 2 or 3 times, but just not for the documentary. And he did say yes. But, as you've just said there, what he does and what he says he's going to do and what he actually does are like 2 different things. And he doesn't have an agent or a publicist. He has a lawyer who basically said, he might have said yes to you, but it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to do it. So I tried. I have that, I don't know if you know the Sofia Coppola story where she had to keep phoning him every day for him to do Lost in Translation because he wouldn't answer her calls, and she wore him down in the end, and then he agreed to do it, and the rest, as they say, is history. So I was given his telephone number, and I tried that, and I got completely ignored. And then a friend of ours who used to work at 20th Century Fox said, you need to be pretty and blonde. So I was like, oh, right, okay, well, we were stuffed, basically. Sorry about that, everyone. So
Bleach.
But you know what? What question would I ask Bill Murray? I mean, I know we do have a list of questions to give him.
Do it'd be interesting to see if he had any regrets about actually doing it. Just see whether or not it's like, if somebody likes the attention, but he doesn't like the attention, if you see what I mean. Ghostbusters really made global stars. It's like Sigourney said, you do that and then she was famous. And it's not that she wasn't famous prior to Ghostbusters, but it put everybody on a completely different level. And I think Dan Aykroyd I would have known about because Into the Blues Brothers, but I wouldn't have known about who Dan Aykroyd was because he had the costume on and it was just one of the Blues Brothers. But Ghostbusters just changed all of that.
Yeah. Do you think it was would you say it was Bill's defining role? It cemented his celebrity A-list status?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it did that. Yeah, because he only did what's he did? He did Little Shop of Horrors as a cameo, and he didn't do anything until Scrooged, if I remember rightly. So, because he just stepped away from it all. But I would say that was the film that did it. Because he's quite a deep person.
Yeah, he really is.
I think he was maybe a bit uncomfortable with the baggage then, that it I guess a bit like with Harrison Ford and answering things about Han Solo, you just get this, they've done it to the point where it's making them numb.
Most actors are working to the next project, and what they're doing now, they're not really interested in talking about what's in the past.
Yeah, it wouldn't bother me so much. I mean, if in the next in 50 years' time, if I'm still around and I'm still talking about the doc, I'm happy as Larry. I never thought I'd be doing something like this. Yeah. But for them, it's a whole different process. So
I imagine the sense of performance, perhaps because everything has to be fresh, and it's about you creating a moment that, I guess, anything that is history is not the now. It's literally so. Yeah, I kind of get that. Not being an actor, but I can envisage it.
Yeah, exactly. The one question could be that the part of Venkman was written for him. So that is how Dan Aykroyd, Ivan Reitman, Harold Ramis perceived him and his personality. It's very much Bill Murray.
Yes.
Is that how Bill Murray sees himself?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question.
Yeah.
But he will never know this because he didn't sit and do the interview.
No.
He'll watch.
But he might see this and he'll go, "That's a really great question."
And he'll be like, "Maybe I'm into brunettes now." We'll have.
Who knows? Tastes change.
This is it. You're not the same person you were 30, 40 years ago.
But that is the truth.
There we are. So let's talk about the structure of the documentary. You chose to sort of pretty much follow the production process through from script to production to post-production. In terms of how that rolls out, in terms of it being a documentary, did you ever consider having a presenter or intertitles? It's quite brave, I think, to have a 2-hour documentary which just unfolds in front of the audience.
Yes.
You obviously had conviction in your storytelling, and you felt that it was gonna work. Were there any times when did anyone ever chime in and say, "Hey, I think you should have a presenter"?
I think you should have a presenter.
Yes.
Yes, because guess what? She was a presenter. So I was going to do that.
And then it was vetoed.
And then it was vetoed. I didn't get the memo, I hasten to add. But you know what? I mean, sort of joking aside, you've got to kind of put your ego at the door. And I always believed in your vision. And I think the fact that we were going to do it that way in the beginning, I don't know, over the passage of time, it just didn't feel right, did it?
Yeah, that was basically it. It was, because you can fill in, a lot of blanks that you don't get within the interviews. Some people don't remember certain things and all the rest of it. And then so the presenter go, "Oh, well, blah, 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 blah." And which is fine. And even like with the book, actually, for that matter, it's the same kind of thing. It's like, if we weren't told it, then that's kind of it, really. It's like if I put 30 seconds or a minute of Claire or whoever kind of presenting, say Ernie wanted to do it for us, because it was kind of a thing at the time anyway. But then that's a minute or 30 seconds of not hearing from the people that actually made, and that's the way that I ended up seeing it. It does make life easier because you can get your beginning and ends, that beat when somebody says something. It's quite. But I don't know. It just felt like the right thing in the end, and it makes it a little bit more timeless.
Yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from. I mean, it's an existential answer, in as much as it's the truth coming from the horse's mouth, and anything that Claire says is what Claire's or whoever would present would be what they deemed was the truth from all these sources. And I guess it makes it as honest as you can possibly get it, to have it from all those people. So
Absolutely.
and it wasn't a question to pick fault. It's
no,
it's actually me giving you guys a bow, because I think your bravery was rewarded by the fact that all these people completely connected with you and gave you their heart, for good or for better or for worse, because from what I can see, we've all enjoyed the spectacle of the final film and enjoy it for what it is. Hey, if behind the scenes people were tearing their hair out, setting themselves on fire, that's just part of the course, right? That's Hollywood.
I think for us, the winning points of the doc is about the people. Yes, there's a story of how this film was made, but the truth of it is that it's a celebration of the people that made it.
Yeah,
that's what it really became for us. That's the beating heart of it, isn't it?
The personal interest story became that. At one point there was somebody else involved, and they had a tendency to kind of remove a lot of the kind of human elements, the way that some people kind of pause when they talk, and sometimes it's good to remove that just to condense stuff, but little twerks in their voice, or a giggle or a sigh, and some of those things tell you something about that person. It's subtle, but it's there. And when you remove that, it just becomes a lot more sanitized. And it was just like, no, we want to show that the way that Richard and Terry interact with each other, and the kind of friendship that they had. And so you do see the personalities, and by knowing the personalities, you understand how the film became what it is, because it wasn't just Dan Aykroyd, it wasn't just Bill Murray or Ivan. It was a accumulation of personalities that came together that made this film work. I
love it.
That was the kind of like thing.
I think audiences today, with their love of unabridged podcasts, etc., maybe the oxygen is better than ever for this.
Yes. It's very
people really want that. They want a kind of unabridged truth. So in terms of structuring the documentary, it significantly is kind of, I notice every sort of 20 minutes you've got a break. It's like we get a little pause.
Yes.
There's and then I noticed a little spark, the magic of it all, manageable chunks of information and thematically building this picture.
For a film, is like, every page is like a minute of screen time, something like that, or roughly. And it's just a really good way to gauge. And I don't like to kind of like be like completely bound to that, but it's like, okay, well, if I make, say when they're talking about Slimer's about 10 minutes, and then Stay for about 10 minutes, having that just kind of time frame in my head that I need to kind of keep it down to, for me really helps just kind of focus on what's really important, what's needed. But also it's like, is the flow there? And if it does feel like a nice flowing conversation, then that's fine. And by adding another minute, great. And if I need to take off another minute just to get that working, that's fine as well. So it's always in my, I know I have a slight mind where it's like having a kind of structure in time, because that way, and you sometimes you sit there and you start to get a bit kind of like, this is going on for a bit too long, or it's like, well, that seems a bit short. And I seem to have a good sense of that, I've found. So yeah, there is elements like, okay, because originally Slimer's, when it's all together, it's like 45 minutes or something. It's a lot of information there. So that was like, okay, all down into, it's got to try and be about 10 minutes. So yeah, that was that.
But you definitely did. You did put fade to black.
Yeah, there's bits where I just play that, because it just feels like a nice kind of like pause that, and then, which they do in the film. So it's like, they don't really do that.
That felt good. That felt good to me.
Excellent.
Let's have a quick rapid fire geeky bit for the camera nerds out there. Over the course of the filming, you did mention to me before about how many different formats you use. You started on tape.
Yeah.
So what cameras did you film this wonderful documentary on?
The one, you can't see it now because it's on top of the bookshelf, but it's the Sony Z1 was the first camera that we had, which was tape. That was HDV. But at the time it was like, HD, pocket size, amazing. Oh, almost pocket size if you've got big pockets, which I don't.
We certainly don't now.
And then we did that until 2011. And then we swapped to the Canon XF305, which was card based. And that was mainly because of the tsunami that happened in Japan.
Yeah.
And it wiped out like the manufacturing side of stuff, but the warehouses which stored the tapes got obliterated from what I remember hearing. So getting tapes for the camera became really hard. I mean, you'd go into the shops and there's loads of them, and you go in and there's like 3. It's like this is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
So and everyone say, yeah, I should go car based. It's much easier. And there is something, again, it's that kind of physical, practical thing. Like when we do the interviews, you get the tape, you write your little code on there, and you write, Harold Ramis, Ernie Hudson, Sigourney, whatever. And there's something about writing that, even though you've been with them, it just makes it more real when you've got that physical tape.
Yeah.
And now I don't have the cards of I've kept Dan Aykroyd's one, but everybody else, it's like, we've got it copied across multiple hard drives. You just don't need it on a card anymore. Delete it. It's expensive anyway. We swapped over to that, and then the last set of interviews were done on the Sony FX3, which was really because you got proper lenses on that, so that was really nice. Which is a shame we didn't have something like that earlier, but money mainly more than anything else.
And technology, just everything's just changed so rapidly since 2011. And in terms of how you cut it, what NLE did you use to cut the documentary on?
So it was originally Final Cut 6, I think it was. And then when Apple decided to change Final Cut to be what it is now, like Final Cut X, which did not work with the way that I worked. I couldn't get my head around it. And a friend said, and I was getting a bit concerned, and a friend said, have you tried Adobe? And I hadn't done for years. I mean, last time I'd seen it, it wasn't a great piece of software. And he goes, oh no, now it's like Final Cut 8. It's like, really? Yeah. So I moved over to Premiere, which was pretty easy going. And for the most part, that was fine. I do find them to be a right pain in the neck. I have to say, like they'll do an update. One time we were set to deliver the film. I was like, yeah, I'll update to the new version of Premiere. This is going to be fantastic. And it just, whatever it did, I couldn't render the film out to a file. No. And it took me about 2 weeks to revert everything back to what it was, made the changes that I'd made within the time when I'd updated to then, it was such a, that. So I found Adobe to be a bit iffy. And then the grade was all done on DaVinci.
Right.
So, and Adobe's fine now. It's a lot more stable than it kind of was at that particular point. But yeah, that was it. That's what we used.
It's one thing to make a film. It's another to market it. The film is available on Blu-ray in terms of streaming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is available. We've got our distributor is Screenbound in the UK, and you can get it on Blu-ray, or via HMV, Amazon, our website, of course. If you want a signed copy, you can buy it through our website. VOD on iTunes, YouTube, Rakuten, Sky Store. So all of those places that you would normally go to be able to download it. And in the US, I believe you can get it on Apple as well. About the other platforms anymore.
And you've got the book, goes into more detail about the whole thing.
Here we go. That's the Blu-ray. Anthony, you can model the Blu-ray. There we go.
Done that before.
And that's the book that you can also buy via our website, which is ghostbustersdoc.com. But also you can get this on Amazon if you prefer to shop there, or the Great British Bookshop, or you can buy it online as well, Waterstones and foils if you prefer. But yeah, you can get it on Amazon, but preferably get it through our website because we get more money that way, quite honestly. But it's 577 pages. It is the oral history of the making of Ghostbusters, and also how, our little journey into, how we made the documentary. So if you want to learn a little bit more, to sort of pick up from where we've discussed today, it's kind of all there. The foreword is written by, drumroll please, Ernie Hudson, if I can find it. There we go.
Fantastic. Look at that.
So it's not a picture book. It is, though there are images in there, it is really an oral history of the making of Ghostbusters. And it is everything that people couldn't, that we couldn't fit into the narrative of a film.
Excellent. And you said you're nearing completion of the second documentary, Ghostbusters 2. So we'll see that out at some point, maybe later this year.
Yes.
It's literally, we're just sorting out all the legals and everything at the minute, which is a process in itself. But we're nearly on top of all of that. So all being well, it's down to distributors and stuff, you know, that's the long and the short of it, but all being well, it should be this year.
Yeah.
That's what I think the basic conversations that we've been having lately, which is, I mean, yeah, it'd be a bit different. It was sort of like, yeah, kind of halfway done, but it's all there now, thankfully. It's just like getting all that kind of annoying.
Are you finished with Ghostbusters, or is there?
For a while, I think.
Yeah, we want to do other stuff. There's either docs and films that we want to make, and people have asked us about like the other Ghostbusters, and the 2016 one now, it's like nearly 10 years since that got made. So so people have asked, and it's like, you know, although there was, I think, a very interesting film to be made on the 2016 one.
Yeah.
And you could make something on the newer ones as well, but I don't know. I feel quite happy with what we've achieved.
Yeah,
and
I think so. I think we've you know, we've cleaned up the town and Too Hot to Handle. I believe we've paid respect to the people from in front and behind the camera who, you know, who went into making these films that we love and treasure, and we still treasure to this day. I think we actually love the films even more.
Yeah.
So I've watched the documentary twice, and I watched the movie in between both viewings, and I now have to watch it again just to really, for me as a proper movie nerd, I can enjoy that movie even more knowing what I know. And in fact, it'll probably make the experience even more kind of like, I'll just be bowing the whole time.
Yeah, it does that. I mean, I think that again, down to the great work that you with Anthony Zart and Derek Osborne did with the film, because I wasn't really involved on the visual creativity side of it. I got all the fun stuff. You know, you feel that actually knowing how it was made, you earn more, it gives you more respect. Doesn't it really? So it doesn't spoil anything.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks, Adam.
So I'm going to say thank you so much, and I wish you all the best for both the documentaries. They have been a joy. The first one's been a joy to watch. I can't wait to see the second.
Thank you, Adam.
Take
care.
Thank you
Thanks for having us on.
Take care. Welcome. It's been awesome. Thank you.